On top of Old Horror Hill, in a secret laboratory, Professor Weirdo and Count Kook were in their monstrous glory. 6 drops of the essence of terror, 5 drops of sinister sauce.
Hello and welcome to TMR podcast number 1. TMR is about technology, myths and realities, and we'll be talking about that in this podcast and up and coming episodes. So I'd like to introduce Sonny and myself, Chris, and we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves and our background and where we're from.
Right, Chris, I think we have a master plan on paper here, and we're going to ask the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, and why. So first of all, who? Who are we, Chris? Should we start with you?
No, you fire away first.
I fire away first. All right. I'm Sonny, real name Sanjin Dedic. I am originally from Bosnia in Australia since, 2002. I previously lived in 3 war zones: Bosnia, Libya, Iraq. Now I'm here. Hopefully everything's going to be fine. I am an engineer by trade. I work presently part-time teaching systems engineering and maths in a high school. And I tinker around with a lot of stuff. Automation, 3D printing. And in collaboration with Chris, I started a company called Integrated Nature, which will basically leverage automation, electronics, and filtration systems into, making your home a more self-sustainable place. About you, Chris?
Well, my name's Chris. I'm getting old. I've been working on mechanical services since I was 16. I've built cars. I've built all sorts of mechanical objects. Right now I've spent the last 5 years developing a water filter that removes fluoride and pesticide from water. I'm into research and development. I do a lot of study in relation to investigating all sorts of news, sometimes technology based, sometimes not, sometimes hidden technology or technology that's been suppressed, which we're going to talk a lot about in these future podcasts. So if you're into suppressed technology and the reasons why it's been held back from civilization, you will learn a lot on this show.
No, and just to add, I think talking to Chris is very much changed my career path. When I met Chris, I was a mechanical engineer working for a Fortune 500 company designing mine dewatering systems. And it opened my perspectives up to the point where I realized that not working in a company, you'd do more engineering, it'd be more advanced, and you'd actually do it to the point where you're not optimizing a subsystem of a subsystem and a little piece of the puzzle. Like, the only way you're going to actually develop something that may affect your life or change the world or effectively, improve living conditions on our little planet is not by taking a well-paid job that's offered by a big corporation. Now, what's our next point? What is this podcast going to be about? Well, we talked a lot about technology. This podcast is going to be about what is going on in the world through more of a technological lens. And why a technological lens? Well, look around, guys. We're in a building with a roof over their head being recorded through microphones, which have all types of amplifiers, electronics, transistors. We live immersed in a technological ecosystem, so to speak. Now, who controls this technology? Who owns the patents to it? Who's developing the next generation? Who owns, the access? Who owns the video behind this? The access to millions and millions of terabytes of data of, recorded conversations. That is one good question. And secondly, the progress of technology. How come, your TV used to be that huge and weigh half a ton, and now it's one thin little strip of LEDs.
And I think
in a decade, Chris. In a decade. And yet the jet engine has remained the same for 60 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, without researching it straight away, I can tell you that the jet engine was invented just before the end of the Second World War by a British engineer, And
implemented by the Germans in the V2
well,
rockets.
well, I can't talk about the Germans because I haven't researched. But as far as I'm aware of at this point in time, it was a British engineer that invented it. It started to make progress into the Second World War right at the end. And it's still based on the combustion system. So, you know, if you want to talk about your car that you currently drive as a combustion engine, a jet engine is a combustion engine also. We haven't developed anything that can supersede this this technology, or so they tell us. I mean, I find it ridiculous that these, and we're going to delve into this. We're going to find these hidden technologies which are right in front of all of our faces, because the patent office, right, and we'll talk about patents in the future, but the patent office is holding these technologies under license, and they will not release them. And we'll also talk about...
It's not the patent office. I mean, it's the corporations that own the patents.
That's true. That's true.
That's true. Like, even though this is podcast number 1, we know what podcast number 2 is going to be about already, and it is patents.
Oh, for sure. I think we're going to kick that bitch in the bag.
About 2 weeks from now, we're both going to really dig into some dusty files or corners of the internet that don't get visited all that often. So what's up on our next list? So we got who covered, what covered, where are we? Okay, Melbourne, Australia. Australia... Well, how do we describe Australia to say the average European or American?
Well, if we're talking to people in Libya, Afghanistan and Iraq, no one's dropping bombs on our houses. So it's pretty comfortable living down here. And work-wise, I mean, there's plenty of work out there. We seem to be middle class. We all seem to be doing all right. We have nice houses, nice cars, and the rest of it. So we're not like the US, but anyone who's listening from the US... we probably know a lot more about the US than you do if you watch mainstream media.
Well, no. Also, like, one image about Australia. You see, in Australia, we live here and we have this image, we're having this functional and successful economy. And, you know, we live in a nice, progressive country. But look, the reality is, we live in a continent that's bigger than America, with more resources per capita. I mean, 10 times more resources per capita than, like, the richest country in the world, which would probably be Norway. Now...
Yeah, go on.
The fact that we live a relatively comfortable lifestyle doesn't answer the question of whether we get, you know, the relatively fair citizen share of resources. The truth about Australia is that even our currency is being borrowed from the international markets. We don't even print our own money. We actually pay European and American banks interest on the money we spend. Our farmland is being bought up by Chinese interests because they got to feed their 1 billion people. I don't even know
we're not allowed to eat that food.
If we, the citizens, are actually getting a share of that.
No.
All of those minerals, like, you know, iron ore, trillions of tons of iron ore, copper, etc., gold, silver. Australia has the full gamut of it. That is all being mined by multinationals like Rio Tinto, BHP, Billiton, Orica, etc., which are all multinational corporations which pay, wait a second, half the tax of other corporations and have the government build all their infrastructure.
Oh yeah, the taxpayer pays for all the infrastructure.
And nothing gets added on in Australia. So Australia is like, I don't have a perfect analogy for it. I mean, I'm sure you all have some story in your past with some rich kid that you wouldn't have liked, but he was, you know, he had all this cool stuff, and you just made friends of him with him so you can take all this shit. And he didn't seem to mind, because his parents would just buy him something else the very next day.
Yeah.
So Australia is like that rich kid who's a total chump in school, and everybody's taking advantage of him, but he doesn't mind, and he's happy, and they're happy. And that's kind of like the situation of where we are.
But we're not going to talk about the government treating the people like that. We're talking about the multinationals and the corporations that are just exploiting this country and saying that if the people of Australia and the government doesn't like us mining that ore out of the ground, then we'll take our business elsewhere.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, that's
under the sea or something?
No, they haven't figured out that they're taking the ore out of the ground. So they've gone, oh, wait a minute, we can't take our business elsewhere because we're taking their resources. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to bring in cheap labour from overseas to mine that ore, because the Australian worker is costing us too much money. We're not making enough profit.
And where, you know, where else can we go with this analogy of Australia of that chump? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, you look at America, you got this Pentagon, which takes half of their discretionary budget. You got all these hawk generals. You've got,
that a private enterprise, the Pentagon? Is it a private company?
It actually is a conglomerate of private companies which basically run the military. But no. You've got these masterminds. You got like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, working out how to conquer the world.
How come he hasn't got cancer yet?
Yeah. Then you got like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. The multi-billionaires pretending to be all charitable while literally, pushing big pharma on
They
Africa.
just use lube when they're raping you.
But see, in Australia, there is a total absence of these criminal masterminds. Like, even our billionaires. Like, we have this Gina Reinhardt, who's like the richest woman on the planet Earth.
$91 billion in a year profit.
And she looks like Jabba the Hutt. And she says something stupid every 5 minutes. And so, and our prime minister can't string 5 sentences together while being understood. And the last guy that had an original idea got kicked out of office in 5 minutes. So basically, Australia is very, even though you come down here, you kind of have a feeling you're in California. It's a rather different, it's on a different planet. That we are run by sort of semi-competent people taken advantage of by all these nefarious interests. And there's still so much left over that we live one of the most comfortable lifestyles on planet Earth. As a consequence of that, I think there is no more complacent people on anywhere more indifferent to the political situation on planet Earth than Australians. They wouldn't know who's in office, what's going on, why the jobs are good or why the situation is bad, or what's going on in America, or what the hell the war in Syria is all about. People here just lay back and watch the footy, and footy's this egg ball thing they kick around seemingly without any purpose.
It's just like the soccer. I mean, as soon as Australians feel bad about something their politicians are doing, or the government's doing, or some conglomerate is ripping off the system, bring out the football stars. Let's parade them out in front of us. Let's bring up some story about their girlfriend that just got shot, or taking drugs, or these are the stories of every day on the news.
This was a headline for 1 month. A sport where the average size of a guy is about 6'4", and the average width is about 4 feet. They're like 150 kilo tanks running around, and scandal. They use steroids.
Well, see, a lot of the Australian people believe that their football club is them. It's their little club. It's their, they're there to play for the people. They haven't realised that in the last 10, 15 years, our football in this country has gone corporate. It's gone so corporate it's not funny. They even built a whole stadium full of corporate boxes, and only a limited amount of fans, paying fans, cash customers, can come into the door.
Yeah,
and then they're startled that these players are taking performance-enhancing drugs to enhance to perform. I mean, this is like scandalous. I mean, it's so much bullshit. I mean, it's ridiculous.
As far as I'm concerned, given that the spectacle is so pointless, they might as well take the drugs. It'll be a bit more.
Yeah, but it's just like Rome back in the days when things are bad. Give them bread and send them to the Colosseum.
No, we got the Colosseum before things get bad. Things are actually quite good in Australia, but they're getting the Colosseums ready. And by the way, every arena is named after a company, and it's so shameless. Like, they keep changing names. Like, since I arrived in Melbourne, the second stadium at Australian Open was
Etihad.
It was Hisense, then it was Vodafone. I think now it's Etihad.
It's something different.
It's anyone who pays can get anything named after them. But anyway, where were we next? So we covered the who, the what, the where, the when. Well, it's 2013, sometime in February 16th, actually. The world hasn't ended in 2012.
No.
As far as I know, we're not ascended yet to the fourth dimension.
No.
So we'll be around for a few more years, and then it's now is a better time than any to start figuring this world out. Why are we doing this? All right. Well, lots of good alternative media out there. Corbett Report, Alex Jones, Alternet, Land Destroyer, etc. We just look at the whole gamut, and we're all basically news junkies, both of us.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we just thought the aspect of technology, the lens through which the advances in technology and the suppression of certain technologies is affecting our world is not being covered. It's not being covered very well. There might be, a subsection of people claiming to invent a source of infinite energy every 15 minutes, and they're seen as kooks. Some rightly, some possibly wrongly. But a view onto how the world works through an observation of how technology impacts society was missing, and we're here to try at least to provide that.
And we're exposing those myths that people go, oh, that's all conspiracy theory, that's not real. We're going to back it up with real facts, real research, and we'll even give you points of reference along the way. So, this is going to be a really good podcast if you're into that type of thing. And anyone who says the word conspiracy is as far as I'm concerned, is just someone who doesn't want to stick his head out from the status quo, doesn't want to stand out and say, I'll think about that, I'll give that some thought, or throw it straight into the same box as the UFOs and ghosts and stuff like that. I mean we're going to talk about everything here. There's going to be no holes barred.
And quite frankly, unlike a lot of the shows out there, at least I'm going to do this every single time. If we actually don't have the facts to back up what we're saying, we're going to let you know that we're speculating. We're going to know we don't know, this is what we think it might be. Yes. And when we have the facts, we're going to lay the facts out for you. And
we won't be, there'll be no praying to God, and there'll be no religious talk unless we do a whole program just on religion and its fallacies and its we're not going to, there's some media out there that always likes to fall back into religion. Alex, I won't be talking about you, but if you're listening, there'll be no praying to God and thank you, Jesus, because I think that's personally the coward's way out.
Alright. Anyway. I don't know, we have also, the way this podcast is going to work, this is going to be the introductory podcast, but normally we'll go for about an hour. We'll have half an hour's worth of content, and then we're just going to, free for all talk about what the hell's going on in the world. Now, we thought the first segment we're going to talk about is news in our local media, to see how it's affecting our lives. This is what we're being told. When you open your email and you see the news page, this is what
people think if they watch the 6 o'clock news that they're getting all the information they need. And you know what? Maybe that's all the information people need, because they always go with this. There's a great saying here in Australia, and I don't know if it's anywhere else in the world, and the saying is, ignorance is bliss, right? Yeah. But is it? If I said to you today, if you could know the future, right, whether it be a week or month or a year ahead or even 20 years ahead, would you want to know? And I've asked this question to a lot of people, and seriously, I think there's a lot of people out there, when I get the answer, they think about it. Some of them don't, some of them answer straight away. But it's not just the answer, it's how you answer it. And a lot of people, they don't want to know. Because a lot of people don't want to hear anything negative. They don't want to hear anything negative. They only want to hear positive. Like if when I went overseas and I went over to Italy, and I was talking to some relatives and some friends over there, and they were saying that things are pretty tight. There's not much work. Most people are working 3 jobs, not because they want to. They're all part-time, because they can't get a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. They just don't exist anymore. Everyone's just doing bits and pieces. But they're getting by. They're just getting by, getting by. Now, when I come back to Australia and someone said to me, how was your trip? And I said, look, it's great. The beaches are nice. It's cheap. It's good. It was relaxing. And I start talking about some of the things that aren't so good. But I want to try to convey to them that what's happening in Europe today is what's going to happen here eventually. Whatever happens overseas is eventually going to come here. Now, as soon as I talk about some of the negative aspects of work and the rest of it, people don't want to hear it. They just go, oh, well, I don't want to hear that. It's too distressing. So when I get back to the whole, if I could tell you the future through like a perfect example would be Gerald Salento, right? He does trends, right? Trends in the media and trending based on historical trending, what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future. Great way to look to see what direction humanity is going in. And yet a lot of people don't want to hear it. No, I mean, it's interesting to know what's going to happen tomorrow, but some people just don't want to hear the negative aspect.
And it's not like, the way you told the story, it's not like you're giving someone a spoiler away to a freaking movie. In a sense, it's like you're looking at the future and people go, or you just give them a relatively probable range of possibilities, you know. I mean, let just move a little on the side. What you're going to see in the background is a 3D printer being built. It's about 80% done. And talking about the future, given that engineering is what I do, I really think that once you start making things, even the most basic, that printer is made about 30% out of components that are printed on that printer. And as any part of it gets better, the components that make it up get better, and it gets better. And if you can print out all your plastic trinkets, you know, you look around from your computer, monitor, stand, keyboard, you're surrounded by plastic trinkets. When you get to a stage where you can print them out for free yourself as you need them, customized to your needs, that kind of ends. Factories, big companies. A similar thing is going to happen. They'll be printing electronics within a few years.
Well, I don't know, Sonny. I know. Yeah, well, that's fantastic. But what I was going to get to is that I think it was you telling me that in addition to this 3D printer behind us, you can buy another machine. You can throw plastic bottles in. It breaks them down, chews them up, puts them into a wire, into a plastic feeder that you can use in that printer. So not only are you recycling old products and running them through and reprinting them, you know, that's just a win-win. You know, that's full circle. And now we just finished printing these. We're going to give them out, thousands of them. So, you know, this is what we could be printing. And we know everyone wants one of these.
Anyway, we're going to talk about we're going to do our segment 1. So segment 1 is news this week. And we'll see what the mainstream media has to offer to us.
Stupid news.
All right. First article comes from Yahoo 7 News. Australia's pricey prices. And it goes on to tell us that we're being ripped off for just about everything. They've done some shopping. Even UK, which is considered one of the most expensive countries on the planet, pays, what is this? Per shopping basket, they pay like $15.62 and we pay $27. Chris, for my reasonably good math skills, that's about 40%.
Yeah, but see, that's just that's typical. When a country is doing well, right, as far as work hours and monetary income, and the dollar being where it is right now in Australia, these companies know they can gouge you, right? When things get tough. I mean, we've even got this not just in one spot, but if I went shopping in South Yarra, which is in Melbourne, is probably one of the richest areas in Melbourne, the prices are cheaper, right? They are cheaper compared to a working class suburb like Cranbourne.
And
this is the same shop selling the same tub of margarine and the same
And I'll
bread.
tell you why, and I will tell you why. Because if you're in an upper class suburb, you have maybe some awareness of how much things should cost, about how much they cost overseas, about business opportunities in case somebody's ripping you off. But it's literally our ignorance being exploited. If you're too dumb to notice that you're being ripped off, you will be ripped off. And I don't know if dumb is the right word, but complacent and indifferent definitely do apply. And as we made the point earlier, Australians are complacent, they are indifferent, and being ripped off is just one of those very natural consequences that happens in a free market.
Well, free market is another word for monopoly. I mean, there's no, I mean, free market, a lot of people you hear this word from another alternative, Alex Jones likes to talk about free market, but he doesn't understand what it really means. Cause
Chris, can we not go down that, because even I'm going to go on like a 15-minute spiel about the freedom of free markets.
No, all right. But I was just going to keep it brief, and I was going to say, when we talk about free markets, a lot of people just assume that we're freeing up the red tape in the market. We're freeing up, but what we're doing is we're dropping all regulation across the market. So we're letting companies like Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, and that come into a meeting and monopolise about how they're going to set the prices.
Because in a sense, the freedom, to compete is also the freedom to rip you off when there is a lack of competition. In Australia, all our groceries, I mean, maybe not all, like 80% of people buy them.
Two major
companies who are totally in bed with each other. We pay like $5 for a loaf of bread. I mean, I have been to some 30, 40 countries around the world, And when I came here, I couldn't help but laugh. Like, what, seriously, a loaf of bread? You know, when I lived in Libya, say what you want about Gaddafi, at the end of the day, the bakeries, they would close at like 8 p.m. and they would leave all their bread out that they made that day for people to collect. The bread was virtually free. And now I'm here paying $5 for like 3-day-old bread.
Oh,
I wouldn't, so in a third world country, I wouldn't eat that if it was given to me for free, and here I gotta pay $5 for it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, that's free market, kind of, because see, when one company gets really successful and really good, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and buys the next one and buys the next one and buys the next one and buys the next one, and then you have a monopoly. It's kind of like a consequence. But let's end it on that note. And bottom line, Aussies are complacent, indifferent, and we're being ripped off for it. It doesn't come free. Not giving a shit about what's going on in the world has consequences, and this is just an obvious one. And thank you. What is this? Yahoo 7. This is about the first smart thing I've heard from you in a very long time. Okay, next story from Yahoo 7. Not as life-changing. Woman goes to hospital for hernia, leaves with a newborn girl. I mean, what are we learning here, Chris?
I don't know. Is it something about some people that look retarded are retarded? Because that's what all I can say. I'm sorry, I don't know. I just think there's a lot of people in this country that are just, and I'm not going to blame them for it, for their lack of education, because that comes back down to the society we live in. But a lot of people, they just, I could tell them that there's meteorites falling out of the sky in Russia today, and most of them would not know or care. Unless they actually see it and it's happening in front of them, they don't care. They won't even take it on as a warning. And I'll give you a perfect example, and it's not happening here in Australia, but what I saw in the US, they had a huge storm come in New York, going back a few months. And they knew it was coming, like a week before.
Sandy? Hurricane Sandy?
Hurricane Sandy, right? This thing was so big, it was hitting the coast, everyone knew about it, it was on the media, they were watching it every day, and yet do you think anyone went out and bought a few extra groceries, went out and bought a bit of fuel for a generator because they knew the power would be out, because, this corrugated iron and metal flying in the sky hits the power lines, knocks the power out. They didn't do anything. And then when it came and it went, there's people standing at the front of the house going, we got no clean clothes. We got no food. Where's the government? Why aren't they here helping us? Why aren't they doing anything? I'll tell you right now, the only people that are going to look after you is you and your community. No one else gives a shit. And the government, if you're going to rely on the government for anything, don't bother.
And just another thing I want to add. You mentioned Katrina. There's this schism, not Katrina, Sandy. There's a schism in society, see, because there is nobody who's taking rational precautions on anything. We've got, like, the preppers, who are basically building bunkers and storing a year's worth of food and waiting for the rapture or Jesus or something. And then you got everyone else going, ha ha ha, the world is good, it's all fine, and the corporations, if we get in trouble, the government will take care of us. McDonald's is nice.
I've got to interrupt here. I don't believe that there's a lot of preppers out there that are thinking they're waiting for the rapture and the second coming. I believe there's a lot of people out there that can see the signs of things going arse up. Like, one little thing, you interrupt power supply. What do they say? Most people go absolutely, 3 meals away from going absolutely anarchy? If you want to, I shouldn't use that word because that's the wrong word to use, but they say people are 3 meals away from just losing it, to the point where they're not going to think about the law, they're just out for themselves, right?
Dude, there's banging going on. Do you hear it?
Yeah, outside. But I don't think it's us. Yeah, so, I wouldn't put all preppers in that, and if you want to talk about preppers, I don't think you can beat the, most country people are preppers. They have pantries full of food and they have full of, all sorts of stuff, because they can't just get in the car and drive down the road. And their shopping centre's full of everything they need. So they've got to have all that stuff in, they've got to have all that stuff in preparation if there's a flood or the power goes out, or there's a million reasons why they've got to have a month's supply thingo, but anyone in the city knows. And not only that, because of the society we live in, a lot of people don't have a lot of money, so they can't afford to be spending a lot of money on prepping themselves up, but they know that they can get on the road at any time and buy whatever they want. But when Hurricane Sandy come past, they were buggered. They didn't have those shopping centres weren't open because there was no power, so all the frozen fruit was gone, and all the none of the cash registers worked, none of the lighting worked. So preppers aren't all end of the world type people. They're just people that can see the signs, the way I see it, to see the signs of collapse in their society.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I am affected by, what is it?
Propaganda.
I think Discovery has, like, the show, and they show it on SBS in Australia where they, cover all the preppers and the people that are preparing for doomsday. And yeah, quite possibly, even someone like myself has been, in a sense, a victim of propaganda that tries to marginalize these people. Clearly, you've been exposed to media. I haven't been. So.
What I was just saying when you were just zipped out for a minute is that a lot of country people, you could call them preppers. They have like 2 months worth of, petrol, candles, fuel, generators, because they're out in the middle of nowhere. They can't just drive to the shop, which is probably 40, 50 k's away, and get what they want. And if they get cut off by floods on the road, or there's a fire, or the power goes out, they've got to be able to look after themselves. They know this. But people in the city don't know this because they know they can just go down the road and get whatever they want. They've never had to deal with anything like a power outage for a month or 2 months. So, I can't put all preppers in the same thing. I'm sure there's some end-of-the-world type people. But look, if the world's going to end, why the hell would you be saving food? I mean, why would you be preparing? You might as well just stand on the roof naked like I did at the 12th of the 12th, 2012. Saying, "Come take me, Jesus, God," and Buddha and whoever else was coming.
All right, our next story. Chris, you watched this in the news the other day. You told me about it.
Oh, yeah.
Cat in, iron out as Monopoly changes game pieces. How long did they cover it for?
Well, I've got to talk about this. In the middle of, it was about 7:30 in the morning. It's I call it prime time because a lot of people watch these shows in the morning. It was on a show called Sunrise. And they were talking about how in Monopoly and how they're going to drop one of the, what would you call them? The little characters you play with when you go around the board. You've got a toaster, a thimble, a ship, a hat, a little car. They're going to drop one and they're going to bring 5 new ones out. And it was all this hoo-ha about it. And I thought, this is not news. I mean, they're putting this up as news. This went for like 5 minutes. I timed it, 5 minutes. Now, in media terms, I don't know what it's worth an hour to advertise on, what it's worth a second to advertise on TV. But I think 5 minutes. I think 5 minutes of a supposedly news article about how they're going to drop one of these things of Monopoly and bring in 5 more is not news. And the stupid thing is, this particular station is struggling for viewers, and they don't know why when they rattle this shit off and try to tell you it's news. And as we find out, I don't know about what part of the world you're in, but Monopoly's gone into cahoots with McDonald's to promote this new game they got going about eating shit food.
So there you go. I mean, it's the typical non-news story disguised as news, which is corporate propaganda advertising. Nobody cares about Monopoly. No one's played the thing since probably the early 90s.
Well,
but since McDonald's buys the rights and tries to resurrect it in order to sell some more poisonous burgers, all of a sudden, wow, Jesus Christ, everybody all of Australia, watch out, Monopoly has changed 4 pieces. You should all know this because you should be thinking about Monopoly.
Well, see, Monopoly's a great game, and anyone who's played it must understand what it's about. And it shouldn't be called Monopoly, it should be called Capitalism 101 Free Market. Because what it's about is crushing the people. Everyone starts off with the same amount of property. Everyone starts off with the same amount of money.
Yep.
And they have to buy property across the board and charge rent and taxes to anyone who lands or uses their stuff. And then slowly but surely you start gouging away until you have all the property, all the money, and you're the bank. Because the guy in front always becomes the bank. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. So, you can call it capitalism. It's the most, really, it's a disgusting game. You're teaching children to take everything and get pleasure out of burning someone else.
And, this is, you know, if I find we've now fallen into this 2-minute spiel about capitalism, you know, the way I see capitalism, you see, when America was founded, right? All these people came out of monarchies in Europe and oppressive regimes, and they go there. And they all started their own, you know, woodworker shop, clockmaker, blacksmith, this and that. Now, when you have a couple million people, abundant resources, land, and untaken in every direction, and they're all out for their own kind of independent livelihood. They're all producing something and competing against each other fairly. It's the best system on the planet. The problem with capitalism is when you scale it up. Now, the guy that was the best blacksmith is no longer getting the most business and charging the most for his services because they're the best. Now, he's actually made a franchise. And now there's 10 of him. Then that franchise gets bought by an even bigger company and opens up in 50 different countries. And then all of a sudden, no other blacksmith exists.
Yeah, but then also that company is based on profits. So as profits have to increase every quarter or every year, and as those profits increase, there's a limit to how much money you can make out of any product. So what do you do when you get to the limit of how much money you can make out of any product? Well, you have to go back to the wages, right? To the people's living. You have to try and cut that in some way, right? Cut their 40-hour-a-week wage. You've got to cut that back. Then the second way is bring in younger people that are on a lower rate. Unqualified people. You can automate. Or you can make your product a hell of a lot cheaper using shit material
and advertising.
Oh.
Now, and just goes back to the original instant, alright? Capitalism was working super good on a small scale with abundant resources. It was the best system mankind has ever seen, talking about managing economics. For a short time, it's kind of like a honeymoon phase, because very soon, the second the third store opens, the quality of one guy's work, his personal investment, his personal service to his customers, that's all gone. When you scale it up, it becomes about how do we milk every last cent out of these suckers we call our customers? Do we manipulate them with advertising?
We make inferior product and tell them it's the best product ever. You
know,
do
do we regulate our product into them having to have it through the government?
Well, the other thing too is we can pay the government to set up a standards or a committee where you can't let anyone else into the market, and you're the sole supplier. Because you've regulated your market in a way where you've manipulated and you've become a, what do they call it when you do that? No, I've lost the word. Yeah, you've regulated yourself, the only person in the market. I mean, you might be 3 different companies selling it, but at the top, the same corporate owns the 3 different companies.
And so, like, when we talk about capitalism, I mean, when you say capitalism is this, capitalism is that, no. Scaled up global fucking capitalism is the ultimate system of centralized power and tyranny. It's even worse than government. However, if you engage in a whole lot of voluntary transactions with people from your own local community, you get your food from there, you get guys that you know to fix up your appliances at home, and you partner up with them to develop whatever you want to develop as a product, it works really good. So if we want to give out one advice, to our viewers and future customers of Integrated Nature, it is, if a company that's listed on a stock exchange that is multinational sells you something, if you're buying that product, you are actually supporting something that is either already a subversive institution or well on its way to becoming a subversive institution. When Steve Jobs made Apple, he just wanted to make the best possible computers and give them to as many people as humanly possible. He didn't plan to have thousands of factories where people jump down and kill themselves from terrible conditions, so you have to build suicide nets. Now, I'm sure that was never part of the plan.
You sure?
I'm reasonably confident.
I never saw that business model when I went to school.
See, I'm pretty confident that was never part of his plan. He just wanted to make bloody computers as good as he could. But that is a natural progression when you have a global multinational. That's what it always ends up in.
Well, you got to screw somebody. You got to be able to screw down everybody to get your profits. And I'll give you another example. The other day, I'm in a hardware store, and in this hardware store they have let's say 12 cash registers, right? And normally half of them are full with women, checking out people buying their plants and their garden stuff and their paint and all that other stuff, home improvement type store, I suppose you could call it. But now we have 6 cash registers that are automated where you check out your own goods, right? 6 of them. So now there's one girl looking after 6. And there's only 2 people on the cash registers. And all the other cash registers are still there, but they're empty. No one's using them because no one's staffing them. They don't have to. Now, I tried to tell this woman, and her daughter works at this store as well, and I tried to tell her that her job is going to be gone soon. And she said, well, no, how can that be? I said, your job will be gone soon because before there was 10 people working at the register. Yeah. Now there's only 3, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking after 6. So eventually, you won't even need to be here because there'll be some sort of automated thing that I can't leave. Maybe a force field at the door that'll stop me from leaving the store until I've paid for that product. So your job will be gone. And you know what she said to me? Oh, well, I'll just find another job somewhere else. Yeah. What is she talking about? Well, we have an ever-expanding population, right? More and more people are coming onto the job market looking for jobs. Unskilled labour, because the education system that we have today is failing everybody because they're not... I mean, they used to train us. I mean, they trained me to do my one job right, as a tradesperson, right?
Yep.
They didn't give me any more or any less. But what I'm saying is they're training people. Most people don't have any training whatsoever. They just become unskilled labour. But these people haven't woken up to the fact that the more you automate anything, there's less jobs.
Look, Chris, here's our next story. China is replacing its workers with robots. And it's from Business...
No, that's not on!
And it's from Business Insider. So the country with the cheapest labor on the planet, okay? This is the slave labor of planet Earth. Comes from this 1 billion person strong country. And robots are even cheaper than Chinese manual labor. Now, this has happened in manufacturing. Our factories produce 5 times more and employ 5 times less people. Well, this is now, as you've talked about, happening in services, in the banks, in the shopping centers, in the supermarkets. And these people don't have the skills. It's not like they have an understanding of the world so they can go out and
pick any job they want.
Apply their various skill in creating products to satisfy people's services and needs, who will also create products to satisfy... It's not... That model is gone. And here it is in the context of the educational system you talked about. The first educational system that ever existed was created by the Germans, or the Prussians at the time, because Napoleon absolutely smashed them in a battle that they should have won, and they went like, well, our soldiers are not patriotic enough, and they're not obedient enough. They haven't gone out like Napoleon soldiers, like madmen, to a certain death in those key battle situations.
They went on fluoride, I saw, yeah.
And and the next one was the Industrial Revolution, where they wanted to make obedient, well, instead of this patriotic soldiers, they were just make obedient workers to just do like simple mechanical tasks.
More fluoride.
Hammer this, next, move it. Yeah. Right. Now, this is what our school system taught last, but now they don't need obedient workers anymore, alright? Now they're kind of fucked, because if they teach people... If people were educated to a sufficient extent to understand the world and the environment, they would no longer want to work for these corporations.
Yeah.
And so they don't need any more robot-like machine slave labor, and military is now so technical that the drones are doing all the killing. And they actually don't need people anymore. And now the school system's gone into this wishy-washy... contentless, easier and easier type of education. And I know I do work in a school, and it's kind of like, how could I put it? If you look at what a human being is something that has basic needs. Roof over your head, food to eat, electricity potentially for all our appliances. Now, anyone leaving an educational institution would either have to directly be able to meet those needs with skills, like building, agriculture, or engineering to create energy, or alternatively should be able to provide key services in the process of producing those skills that plug in somewhere. And none of that happens. Absolutely none of that happens. So if as a student, I'm not saying the schools are that bad, as a student, I mean, I teach systems engineering, we actually teach kids how to make, electronic devices that perform functions that, you could potentially use even at a year 10 level. They build their own solar power torches, alarm systems, etc., etc. But 95% of the people going through this public school don't actually, through either lack of their personal choice or generally through where the system is pushing them, don't actually get access to any of those either insights into the world or skills that may sustain their life. And they're basically we're being prepared to be lemmings. The vision for the world is Agenda 21. This is the rich people going, oh, we'll protect the environment. We're going to pile up all of you people in the suburbs into 100-story high towers that will be in the cities. You'll be living in like 3 square meters of space, monitored 24/7. You'll be fed it's like a prison. You'll get some food. You'll get a place to live. There'll be no, you won't be able to own your own car or anything like that. And the nature will take over the wilderness. And this is, when it comes to the people that run the world, but
you'll get a special permit to visit nature once a year.
Yeah. This is what the good guys, you see, this is like if you go to, like, say, I imagine the CFR or the Bilderberg Group or some kind of a UN insider meeting that they're sitting around the table going, so we want to put away the population in some way that they could basically be harmless and live out their lives in total delusion, plugged into virtual reality in 100-story towers. And this is what the good guys want for you. The bad guys are going, we got this virus. It's really good. It'll take care of all of them. We don't
that
need
swine flu virus,
towers.
that bird flu virus. But
Yeah.
no, look, but getting past that, we had in the end of the war, Second World War, America and a lot of Western countries, not Europe because Europe was pretty smashed, they had the opportunity to kick their workforce back to a 20-hour week, right? The whole population.
Actually, it's in the documentary called Human Resources by a guy called Scott Noble. He literally cites the date and the place of this meeting where all the industrialists meet and go like, we are producing an abundance of everything. There's no one to buy it.
It's very automated.
And should we make it a 3 or a 4-day working week? And they were like, oh no, that would be terrible. God knows what the workers will get up to if they had 3 free days.
Yeah, they might actually think about getting another something else to do.
They might actually figure out how we're exploiting them, and then they
could become competition.
Yeah, and guess what they decided? They're like, no, we'll get all these guys that did the propaganda for the war. I think it was Ivy Lee, Edward Bernays, Robert Lippmann, a couple of others. They got them all together and they said, listen, your skills that like brainwash people into going to like virtually certain deaths to fight some fucking country across the world. Mm-hmm. Now use those same skills to convince all these people to buy all these products that they don't need. And this is like the birth of marketing and advertising was completely coming off the back of a realization that we're producing in abundance. And we could cut off the working week. We could all live so much more comfortably. And they said, no. We need people buying more useless shit.
But see, when they automated a lot of industry back in the war, and we're talking food with big monocultured farms and automation, where it come down to when they were building planes and cars, they were using a lot of robots and automation to do that. They could have fed and housed and clothed a lot of people around the world. And you know what? I reckon people would have worked, that if they cut the hours back to 20 and said, look, can you work 10 hours to feed and shelter someone in another country? People would have done it. But you know what? They got freaking greedy. And they didn't think about the consequences of the stratification they were setting themselves up for. Because now what you've got in this world is resentment. You will have this big resentment for the rich. Now, don't get me wrong. the way our society is structured, there can only be rich and poor. The middle class is disappearing as we speak, right?
Middle class is like a temporary effect of that type of a transition. See, you have an industrialist, and he takes in all these poor farmers, and they come in, and for a little while, a few of them rise up, and a lot of them are at a middle level, but then the robots take over, and most of them just drop down. It's a temporary effect.
Yeah, I know, and like, we had the opportunity to do this, but the problem is the people, you know, if you ask the average American and Australian, well, what about those poor people in, pick a country, Ethiopia, got no food, got none of this, got none of that. We have the food. And you tell them, you know, and it's been pointed out, in 1972, we had enough agriculture, agro-business, to feed the population of the world in 72 15 times over. So the question is, in 1972, and it's 2013 now, why haven't we done that? And the simple reason is they haven't got any money.
Well,
It costs too much.
No. It's not even just the cost. It's this capitalism in general. The global markets have this problem: the abundance. If something is abundant, it costs too little. You can't make money off of it. European Union has policies of paying farmers to destroy their stock.
We do that here.
And paying farmers to grow nothing. And this is because if they were to grow stuff and put it on the global market, the food prices would go so low that all these big agribusiness companies would like really suffer.
They wouldn't make money.
They wouldn't make money.
So it's cheaper to pay the farmer not to grow,
So-
or to plough the product that they've grown back into the ground.
The reason why there's people starving in the world is because, on the balance of things, producing less food is more profitable because it drives the price up. With that maximum price equilibrium, when that gets hit, therefore the food isn't abundant. It's slightly scarce. And the optimal situation for the businesses is to keep the food slightly scarce. And that's why people starve. If the aim of food companies was to produce as much as humanly possible, there wouldn't be a starving person in the world.
That's right. And I can tell you something else, and you can call this a conspiracy theory, right? But Zimbabwe, which is not called Zimbabwe now, it's called something else.
Really? I think it's
No, Zimbabwe. No, it was called Rhodesia, right?
Right.
Now, Rhodesia was the food bowl of the world, right? They produced so much food. They're perfect climate, cheap labour. They had it down pat, right? It was the food bowl, right? The food bowl of Africa, the food bowl of the world. Now that country is now being smashed, right? They had all these issues with black and white, and French, British, American. Everyone's trying to be running this country. So what they've done, they've run this country into the ground. They've run the money of the Zimbabwe dollar went from 100,000, let's say rupee, because I don't know what it is over there. Now it's $1 trillion for the same note.
They're
right?
buying bread. It was like the Weimar Republic.
Yeah, so
they're
they've
buying
killed
bread with buckets of money.
They've killed the currency, right? They killed the currency because they put a guy in there who didn't have any more than a primary school education to run the country, but because he was popular and he was in cahoots with the Western powers that be, they put him in a power and he ran the country into the ground, and he told all the white people, get out, because the black people are going to take over your farms, and they did nothing with them. These farms are empty. There's nothing growing there now. But think about that for a minute. Here's your competition. Here's French, British, American agro-businesses' biggest competition. Cheap labour and the most fertile land on the planet. Well, it's been crushed for the last 15 years. And now they've got rid of their competition.
And look, it's like, all of a sudden, when it comes to, say, the Congo, right? You have basically, rich warlords lording over areas and having child labor dig for coltan and diamonds and rare minerals. And the West is cool with that. That's fine. Because, see, those things are scarce enough and they're needed, and the Apple needs them to make their computers. Then, in that case, tyranny is terrible. But wait a second.
But everyone's
Zimbabwe,
paid off.
If a couple of... Don't get me wrong, I'm all for the people. I'm all for the people owning the land. But you have people being exploited, working as slave labor on the land. West approves of that in Congo. But then you have some middle class, or whatever, some white people in Zimbabwe producing an abundance of food. Okay, maybe they're using exploitation. They probably are exploiting the black population. But all of a sudden, now that is a human rights tragedy. Because wait a second, they're producing abundant food. Abundant food is bad for the economy. Poor people might actually. That is a tragedy.
I've told you, and Hillary Clinton has told you also, Sonny, that human rights is up to America to decide.
Yeah,
That's their job to decide whether it's a human rights issue, and and a dictatorship. Dictatorships are okay if it's okay with the Western American powers that be, and if the dictator doesn't toe the line and do the right thing, then it's a human rights issue, and we got to bomb the shit out of the joint and take it over, like Libya, Syria.
Humanitarian bombing. It's peace bombs.
You ask any Iraqi civilian, and we get plenty of them boating on their way over to this country. You ask them, how's your country since the Americans gave you democracy and freedom? How's the hospital and the school? And they'll tell you, what the hospital and what school? It doesn't exist. It's gone.
We used to have those.
They had them under Saddam. He actually gave them a hospital and a school, but now it's all gone and hasn't been replaced. That place is stuffed. And why? And you know what? Anyone who tells you, oh, it's not about the oil, it's not about bullshit. It's control. It's all it is.
Control of the oil.
It's control. Because with the control of supply, you can control the price.
Exactly.
Simple as that. And you know what? A lot of Americans will sit back, and I'm going to tell you a certain person, Alex Jones again, I love him because he always says, he goes, you know what? I wouldn't care if we were in Iraq and Afghanistan and we were getting that cheap oil, right? Because he doesn't give a fuck about those people because they're different colour. But what he says is, I don't give a fuck about them as long as we were getting something out of it. He's saying we as in the people of America.
Yeah.
But what he has failed to realise, that the companies and corporations don't have a face. They're not patriotic. They don't give a fuck about Americans, right? All they care about is the bottom line, money, rich. And if you want to talk about a certain group of people, we're talking the ultra rich. They only care about themselves.
Well, I mean, if you actually, figured out the companies based in America and the class of 5,000 or 6,000.
It doesn't matter where it's
multimillionaires. If these people, if they were in a sense under the American flag and they share their resources with Americans, yeah, man, the living standard there would be, through the roof. It'd be, but
I hear the living standard in Mexico, even with all their drug killings and the rest of it, is higher. It's starting to become higher than some places in the US. And a lot of Mexicans are now running back over the border and heading home because they know they'll get a better deal. And you know what? Are they going to patrol the borders to stop the Mexicans from going home now? I mean, because they obviously need them to vote in the next president of the US.
Yeah, I mean, that whole situation is ridiculous. But and what is going on in Mexico? It's some war over drugs.
Yeah.
It's the perfect example. Scarcity and abundance. They ban drugs, so they become scarce, so the price is through the roof, so there's a huge business in terms of marketing it. And the same thing for oil. Keep your hand on the valve. It's not about actually shipping that oil to the States. It's having your hand on the valve, and you can get the price up or down as you want it, and then milk, dollars, nickels, cents, and eventually trillions.
And here's the funny thing. Why are the American people, most of them are on welfare, why are the American people taking the drugs? Because their reality they live in, the reality they live in, no work, hopeless, living in a tin, and some of them are living in their cars, they're living under bridges, the infrastructure's broken, they're living in a world that used to have everything and now they have nothing, and they're going, well, if I take drugs I don't have to worry about it. So the drug culture in the US is not just some guy who's well, I don't know, maybe he's a chromosome short, maybe he has mental problems. It's your average Joe now taking drugs because he can't deal with the day-to-day grind of reality.
I believe you're quite right. It's not that I've traveled all over the States. I've been to LA, San Francisco, and Vegas, of all places.
Oh, that's an interesting place.
There's
two different societies right there.
I've been to plenty, whatever, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, a few other third world countries, and I haven't seen as many beggars and poor people and bums on the streets as I did in the States. Which
Well, it's ironic because in Australia here, I have probably ran into, in my whole life, 2 people asked me for money on the street. And, you know, they look pretty well dressed, and we got a great welfare system here, so people, you know, they don't need to beg. But in the US, when I was back there in '92, and I spent 6-7 months in the US driving around, I visited every state and bought a big Ford station wagon and just drove around America. Had a ball. Oh yeah, everywhere I went, I saw them out front of banks, petrol stations, 7-Elevens. It was beggars everywhere. You know, and I saw, and I did say to one American when I was there, I saw this guy, he'd be about 26, 27, super fit, good-looking guy, pushing a trolley with all his belongings in it, looked like he hadn't washed himself in a month. And I said, why? What's wrong with that guy? He looks able-bodied, he looks, you know, and he goes, well, we have a lot of people here with mental illness. You know, we have a lot of people here that just jump out, they just can't handle society anymore, and they don't know what to do. They just, and everything falls apart.
Shit.
And that's where they end up.
I mean, it's, I don't know. In Australia, look, the dark side of Australia is you have maybe a couple 100,000 people literally freaking leeching off the state and living in these.
Yeah, but you can't blame those people for leeching off the state.
No, look, I don't.
Look,
no. I don't want to get into an artificial argument.
No. Before I met you, Sonny, when I was a young bloke growing up, my father used to say to me, look at these dole bludgers. That's what we call them in the US. Anyone on welfare, dole bludger, useless fucking whatever, right? Yeah, that's what my father used to say to me. You know, and I used to go, well, you know, I suppose he's got a point. They could get a job, they could do this, they could do that. Never once thinking about their background, where they're from, who their parents are, their values that they were taught by their parents, and where they come from. And now I'm 40 years old, and I've come to realise that, oh, look, I'm sure there's a few there leeching off the system, just taking advantage of it. But I'm pretty sure there's 90% of them out there. When you look at where they're from and what they've had to put up with their whole life, and you know, maybe their parents and their parents' parents have been welfare, never had an education, you know, you can't blame that person.
No, I
you
don't.
You can't blame anybody for where they are.
No. I do have an absolute belief that every human being on planet Earth has a right to live, and if you live in a country or community or whatever, a society that can afford that, then we should give everybody their right to live.
I'd like to say to people out there watching this podcast that we're not communists, right? We're not socialists. We're not pushing a different agenda here, right? All we're doing is pointing out facts about, you know, the capitalist system. You know, I mean, a lot of people just go, oh, well, that's, you know, the socialist system didn't work, so that's shit, and the communist system failed because that didn't work. That's all bullshit, right? That's all bullshit. There's aspects of the communist system that worked very well. There was aspects of the socialist system that worked very well. The problem is people take bits and pieces from all different aspects, and today in society, if it doesn't make a dollar, right? If it doesn't make a dollar, let the government deal with it. It becomes a social issue.
And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know about you, Chris, I don't actually believe in a given economic system. I don't believe that society should be run this way. My entire belief is, look, it should be run as locally as humanly possible. Okay, you and the 500 people around your neighborhood should get together and say, whoever is interested, we're going to decide how we're going to pay for these certain things, about how we're going to distribute money and how we're going to tax ourselves. And frankly, I'm cool with people deciding that they want to go all the way free market, or they want to pool and share all of their resources. But I think as a human being living in a community, you should have an opinion on it, and you should be involved. And what's going on is that entire buckets of ideology, entire buckets of resource management are being pushed on people, and invariably, whether they are socialist or capitalist in nature, they're usually have exploitation built into them. America is capitalist. The major companies there exploit everything and everyone in sight, okay? The former communist Russia was socialist. Oh, and everybody in sight was brainwashed with propaganda, exploited on as free labor, and forced basically.
Yeah, but you see, you had one big thing with this is what, look, I'm no expert on communism, but I did see one huge flaw, the big white elephant in the room that no one ever sees. I saw the stratification, right? Who you were in the political party, who you were related to, who you knew, put you on a certain spot in that communist system where you did all right. You got a house straight away, right? When you left your mum and dad's house, right? While the farmer down there waits 10 years, and you get a car within a month, where the farmer or the labourer out there in the country has to wait 5 years for
the lack of competition destroys everything. I mean, if you're an engineer, then you're higher than, say, an electrician. But wait a second, you could be a shit engineer. Your bridges could be crumbling. You could be absolutely worthless. And the guy might be a total genius, putting stuff together in a more efficient way. But nonetheless, you're higher class, you're going to live a better standard of living. Because it's not that your level of work. So, I don't know, we're going off a tangent on this communism thing. And I'll just want to put it in 2 sentences. I think big bureaucracies suck. They're inefficient. And they produce inferior...
They produce nothing.
They produce very little. And I think the same is true for any big hierarchy. And, I mean, Microsoft is a hierarchy. GE is a hierarchy.
Yeah,
Boeing is a hierarchy. And even if you have this central control of people that own a big company that push their agenda through the ranks, you have, by definition, a tyranny. The free market, it could be a free market. It's like a free market of tyrannies. The tyrannies competing against other tyrannies and being more tyrannical, exploiting your workers more, protecting the environment less, ripping off your customers more, gives you more success. So the more tyrannical you are...
Oh yeah, but see, the thing is, the environment doesn't have a money value, right? So the environment never even comes into the picture when we talk about profit, the profit motive, full stop. Because as far as the environment's concerned, until it becomes a problem and a company can exploit the repair of the environment, where the taxpayer or the government can see to make a buck out of it, it will never be an issue when it comes to producing any product whatsoever. So the environment is now a government problem, right? And let the taxes fix it up. Because as far as big business is concerned, we can just keep pouring that shit down the drain until the ocean's so damn polluted that then we'll have an issue selling cheap and clean fish that we'll grow ourselves.
Yeah, I think, we've kind of told you, this is the answer we'll endeavor to give you over the next number of podcasts. We've just told you we're not capitalists, we're not communists, we're not socialists, we don't actually stand anywhere on the given political spectrum. We're going to ask you to think for yourselves.
Yeah, think for yourself.
And
do your own research.
As far as politics go, if you're not involved in how your local community is being run and what your neighbors are doing, what your council is doing, how your kids are being schooled, where you get your food from, who you buy from, where you get your energy from, if you're not actually involved in these things, your political ideology matters absolutely fuck all. It's just something you've rehearsed in school, something you say. I mean, these things are irrelevant. You want to actually change the world, you've got to start with your own self, with your household, and with your everyday thinking decisions about who you interact with, what you buy, and who does which institutions, which individuals your life and lifestyle supports, and which ones it denies nutrition from. So if corporations are bad, simply explain to people why they're bad and don't buy their products.
I'd like to say to everyone, I should have said at the start of the podcast, that everything we say, me and Sonny, is total bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And it's total bullshit for the simple reason is it's up to you, the person, to take what we've said as, all right, I either believe that or I don't, but you should look into it for yourself. I mean, don't believe everything you hear and say. It's up to you to look into it. And as far as politicians go, politicians, There's not even a course in university for politicians, right? It doesn't exist. That job doesn't exist.
Most of them do law, which is just
Well,
convincing
no.
people
Law is one.
to falsely believe something.
Well, law is one, but that's all that is how to spin bullshit,
Yep.
right, in circles, right? Wordsmiths, that's all, like a blacksmith. And the other side is accountants, people who count money. Oh, money for this, money for that. Should we spend the money on this? You know, these people don't think about the community or any type of rationale. They're friggin' useless. So your politicians, it's like a real estate agent trying to sell you something. You know, oh, mine's better. It's got this. It's got that, and they never deliver anyway.
And look, I think that the point Chris is arriving at is this: if you try to change the world by voting for politicians, you know what you're going to change? You're going to change their rhetoric. You're going to change their bullshit to sound like something you want. Whereas before, it sounded like something you didn't want. What the reality underlying the political system is going to be more or less the same. And I don't know, should we call it the end at about here?
Well, I'd like to just say, I'm going to stand up and say this. I'm going to say, if you like this program, subscribe down here. Subscribe to our program. We'll be on again.
In a secret laboratory, Professor Weirdo and Count Kook were in their monstrous glory. 6 drops of the essence of terror, 5 drops of sinister sauce. When the stirring's done, may I lick the spoon? Of course, of course. Now for the tincture of tenderness, but I must use only a touch. For without a touch of tenderness, it might destroy me. Oops, too much. Better hold your breath, it's starting to tick. Better hold my hand, I'm feeling sick. Hello, Daddy. What have I done? I'm Milton, your brand new son.